Welcome everybody to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Sapphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts.
And I'm Camille Barron, a healthcare advisor and financial coordinator, also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And I see, other than a beautiful woman in front of me, I see two very, very dapper, handsome young men, and we'll be joined by a third dapper, handsome young man momentarily. And we're going to have quite an interesting show today, aren't we, Roberta?
Yeah, actually, we're waiting on Zeb Breyer, who caught up in the COVID, is talking about a internship and what the future lies. So I told him we will wait. Just pop in when you're ready. But also, you referred to two dapper young men. We got one. I see his name, Sam Izzo. Sam has two parents that are attorneys. His father also is Paul Izzo, who's been on the show several times, and very diverse family, very musical. I don't know, Sam, are you musical too?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I played trumpet. I was a music major in college. Trumpet's my main instrument, but I also play guitar and piano.
Oh boy, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I took beginner's guitar for 28 years. I would call myself an advanced beginner, very beginner. But I got Marc-Daniel laughing. Marc-Daniel, well, Marc-Daniel, I know all about you, Marc-Daniel, but tell our viewers and Sam and anybody else watching about yourself.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be back on the Law, Your Money, and You. For those of you who do not know, particularly, I'm assuming it's just Sam for now. I am a rising third-year law student at Suffolk University. Met you, Roberta, and the Law, Your Money, and You, and Camille when I lived in Sharon a couple of years ago before I got married. And I really enjoyed working with the organization. So it's always a pleasure to be among friends.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Sam, were you always thinking of going to law school, or did you want to go into music?
I think in probably my sophomore or junior year of undergrad, I started to really consider law school. And I took a year off between undergrad and law school, and I worked at the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, where I gained experience in the law. And I think that was the real turning point where I really made the decision to go into law school. So I think it was probably sophomore, junior year of college.
That's interesting. But district attorney, that's mostly criminal law and politics.
Do you have an idea of which area of law you'd like to specialize in, Sam?
Not yet. I'm heavily considering going into areas around international trade, but it's still very. I'm still not sure.
That's interesting. Marc-Daniel, we never really asked you what area of law you're in, because you're already a paralegal for the past 4 years, and you did the mock. He set up the mock trial at Suffolk, not even in law school. But have you thought of what area you're going into?
It's still somewhat of an open question. Multiple areas that I'm exploring. The good thing with my job right now is that it allows me to, it gives me exposure to different areas: family law, criminal law, business litigation, international arbitration. So I get to see a side of all of these. I know what I do not want to do, definitely. But it's still somewhat of an open question, like I said. So we'll see. Interestingly enough, I'll be doing a clinical program next year, starting in September, in the area of juvenile defenders work. So we'll see how interesting I find that. And
you both mentioned international, and that's quite appropriate now that we have truly a global economy and everything functions on a global level. That'd be quite interesting to have some involvement in international law.
Oh, that is interesting. Well, the last time when they were on, we were talking about, this is continuing our series of COVID-19 and how it's affecting you and your future. A lot of the internships were canceled. Now, Sam, did you have an internship set up, or were you staying with the DA's office or the is it the DA's office or the sheriff's?
So I worked for the Suffolk, it was just as a job between college and law school, but now I work remotely for the Norfolk County District Attorney's office.
Oh,
So I
that's
was lucky
good.
that my internship, I've been to the office a few times, but it's mostly remote. But I was lucky that it's still on even despite COVID.
Mm. Is
Oh,
it
that
remote
is
now
good.
just because of COVID, or would it have been remote anyway?
It would not have been remote,
Mm.
but it's mostly remote now.
Mhm.
Is it busy with an election coming up there? For the
For
Norfolk?
me, it my work I don't think really would depend on that. So I work for the appellate unit.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the election might affect it. I haven't seen anything that seems like the election would affect
maybe you can start a band there.
it. Maybe.
Boy, I envy us over there. So, Marc-Daniel, your internship you were going to go to Texas, and
Well,
then
that was the plan. Yeah, I had already submitted the application, been in touch with the firm down there in Texas, but when the pandemic really took off, they decided to err on the side of caution and postpone, which eventually turned into a full-on cancellation. So instead of doing that, I decided to just take 2 extra classes this summer. So tried to find a way to keep myself busy.
that's good. We also talked about how the classes changed to online. Now what's interesting too is Marc-Daniel goes to Suffolk Law, and he's basically Boston. Zev is from Arizona, and he went to University of Miami undergraduate. In law school, he goes to Emory, which was it still is in Atlanta. And Sam goes to University of Southern California. Tell us what it was like that last semester, Sam. How did they handle it?
So it's obviously it started off in January normally. No one expected it to happen, and around I think late March, maybe March 13th or 14th, around that time, they said, for about 2 weeks, we're going to be remote. And they didn't really tell us to leave campus. And obviously, it was still very early on, and no one knew what was going to happen. And I think maybe after a week or a few days, they said, the rest of the semester is going to be remote. And we had to leave campus. So I flew back to my family lives in Foxborough now, and so I did classes remotely, and it was obviously 3 hours, I guess you could say, ahead. And yeah, the rest of the semester was
Yeah.
remote.
But did you live in a dorm there, or did you have your own apartment?
I lived there was an area at USC has a building for 1Ls, and so that's where I lived. So it's like sort of an apartment, sort of a dorm.
Because my granddaughter just graduated there in engineering.
Oh,
And
nice.
the funny thing is, she's still there. She hasn't come home. She has her own apartment, and it's good you got out of the LA area, because that's really
Mm-hmm.
COVID. Have you been on a plane since then?
Not since then. It's funny because it's in LA it wasn't that bad, a few months ago, but now it is,
Now you're
it's
going back there,
difficult to
right?
predict what's going to happen. Yeah, I am going back, in August.
They decided to have on-campus classes once again.
It's still, everything is sort of still up in the air. They originally said, they think that they might have some classes in person, but now I think it's pretty much going to be all remote for the law school and undergrad at USC.
How about Suffolk, Marc-Daniel?
Well, it is going to be largely remote. I think
Mhm.
one factor that ended up playing into it was the administration's decision to deport, well, initial decision to deport international students who were here on student visas. So I think the law school, trying to alleviate the burden on international students, decided to make some of those classes hybrid.
Mm.
So those students would be able to, remain in the country. But
They
my
would
understanding is
be
that
able
they,
to remain, wait, excuse me, they would be able to, or they won't?
right, well, the rule was that if you are going to be fully remote, then the administration was going to have them go back to their country.
Oh,
But
oh,
if the university was going to have some sort of hybrid option where they would have, to be on campus for whatever reason, then I guess they would not be subject to that rule. So the school was considering that. My understanding last time I checked was that they were abandoning that policy. So
Mm.
perhaps that's not going to be as necessary for international students
Yeah,
anymore.
it's on hold
But
right now, I think.
right, yeah, but largely it's going to be remote. Even my clinical program, which involves a lot of client interactions and going to court, representing clients, they're making plans for that to be fully remote.
well, you know,
And
the
how,
courts have opened up, excuse me, the courts have opened up over the
Right.
past week or so. So they're letting people in, and the restaurants have opened up to a limit. So by the time you go back to school, they might have everything more open, and then I would think that they would have classes.
I mean, it's certainly a bit fluid right now. I think the expectation is that everything's going to be remote, subject to change to the extent possible. So it's not set in stone, but there are definitely students, I think, particularly first year students, if they are interested in taking an in-person class and that is available, that they will have that option.
I just got one more question for Sam. Sam, I understand because the other two, Sev and Marc-Daniel, they didn't like the online classes. They got more out of in person. But
Mhm.
did you have something where they did something online where they brought in the students too instead of just shutting them out? How
I'm
how
sorry.
how well when you're the online classes, didn't the instructor, weren't you all able to participate, or did I get that wrong?
Well, we did classes on Zoom, so professors were able to call on students as if it were a class. So students could talk like, it was the same situation we have right now, except with, 60 people. Um, is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, because I don't think they did. I know they didn't do that for Emory, and I don't know, did they do that for Suffolk where the students could participate? Not
Yeah, of
yet.
course. Yeah. So we also held classes on Zoom. I guess what the difference is I was pointing out is you don't get the benefit of that person-to-person interaction that you get, particularly for first-year students, where a lot of times this is an entirely new environment. You want to be able to have access to those resources, the library, being able to go to professors' offices to meet with them, ask whatever questions or on things you might be struggling on. So you miss a whole lot of that in-person interaction, and I think it has some effect. But in large part, I mean, you are able to hold classes and see your peers. Well, those of them that do
Oh.
have the cameras turned on,
And
and
did California have the mandatory pass-fail, or did they go by grades? So how could they really? Did you have a pass-fail in California?
Yeah, it was mandatory pass fail.
No.
mm.
oh,
Okay.
that's interesting. Ours was
Yeah.
optional.
Was it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was mandatory.
Oh, boy. Yeah, so how was your experience with online classes, Sam?
Um, I think given the situation, it was the best they could do. Um, Obviously, they didn't have a lot of time to prepare, and um, you know, at the time, you really the whole country was on lockdown. But obviously, it was not optimal. In some ways, it was a little more nerve wracking to be called on because in law school they do cold calling sometimes, not all the time, but where it's, you know, they'll say, you know, what were the facts of this case, or, you know, what do you think about this argument, or whatever. And nor, I mean, it's generally nerve wracking to have it happen in class, but when you're on Zoom, you know that you're like 60 people are watching you on their computer screen, and um, it's a little nerve wracking. Um, but I know you know, at least we have the technology where we could have done that. You know, maybe 20 years ago, it would have been impossible.
Yeah, I wonder how things would have gone if we didn't have all this technology today.
Exactly.
Hmm. Well, I guess we just have to go along with whatever the requirements are now. We'll probably have a whole generation of lawyers who are more confident working online than they are in person. You never know.
Well, you know, it's different than when I went to law school. They didn't have law firms going to the different schools seeking out prospective. It's almost like the baseball or sports people. They go to different colleges to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently that's what some of these law firms do. I guess a lot of these law firms, they go to the colleges to recruit. How do they do that now?
So are you talking about on-campus interviews, OCI?
Yeah, on-campus interviews.
So that normally would
Okay,
happen for
right.
me around, as if you're 1L going to 2L at USC. I'm not sure about the other schools, but it normally happens right before your 2L year. But that has been pushed back, I think, at least for USC, for January.
Oh, isn't that
So
interesting?
I mean, that's obviously still preliminary because no one knows what's going to happen with the COVID.
But
Oh,
Mac
sure.
Daniel, are you all set now, or are you still looking for another? Well, we don't want your people you're working for now to see it. You'll
Well,
probably. Yeah.
well, my job is very supporting and very open, and they're very encouraging and, you know, pushing you to explore and seek out your interest. So as far as the internship goes, I mean, the summer is practically almost over, and I'm taking classes. So I'm just gonna go ahead and finish out this last year and see where that leads afterward. Who knows?
So how much classes do you have left before you can take the bar exam? You still have to do a third year law, or you've got
Well,
extra?
yeah, I've done 2 years now. Well, I'm a night student, so I was supposed to do this in 4 years. But because I've been taking summer classes consistently and winter classes, I've been able to move my program along a lot faster than my night student peers. So I'll
That's
be able
because
to
you
finish
wanted to get married.
it. Well, actually, I got married before I started, before I started law school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wonder where Zev is. Any more communication there?
No, but maybe he's got a good. Maybe he's got a good thing. Even if we get a minute of him, we'll have it. We can have him in another time. We actually had somebody else who graduated law school, and he was beside himself because he couldn't take the bar exam in Rhode Island. But what is it? Do two of you know about the bar exams? Like what is this like a 5-state bar? Is it just one test for all? How do they do that? Do you
Well, I
know?
know they have the multi-state bar exam now that many states have
Okay.
signed on to, Massachusetts included. I don't know about California. I don't think California has signed on to that yet. But certainly many states have, and you have the option to do that depending on your score to be automatically admitted to practice in many jurisdictions.
Well, that's great.
Do you know of both Sam and Mac? Do you know of people who have switched now who say, well, I don't want to go to law school anymore. This isn't for me. You know, they were like up on the fence, whatever the expression is. And now they say, well, I think I'll change this, or I think I'll wait a year, or I think I'll do you know people like that?
I don't know any people like that personally, but I can imagine that there are probably many people who are probably, just like you said, will probably think, oh, you know, I'll wait a year, because they don't want to start on, you know, with remote classes.
Well, I'm curious, how can you go back to California? How do they expect you to go back to California if they're not going to be able to have the classes just by Zoom? Because you can Zoom the classes
Hmm.
in.
Well, that was, they're not, I mean, they're not, so they had always said all along that even the classes that are in person, you could do remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, they're not requiring you to be in person. So I could have decided not to go back to California.
Mhm.
I just figured that it's um there's the likelihood that there's some important events, or you know, if the COVID gets better, you know, it seemed like a good idea to go in person and be in the area, even though it'd be remote.
So could I take a course, like, what's to stop me for taking the course in your place? How do they know it's you? I mean, so
Well,
you, when you take an exam, how do they know it's you?
well, you had the Zoom bombing phenomenon, and when they first started Zoom classes, there was no security. They sent you a link,
Yeah.
and I didn't see it, but apparently USC and other schools were having people, you know, sending the links to random people on the internet, and random people would show up and, you know, I don't know, do whatever crazy
Yeah,
things.
Zoom bombing. I never
Yeah,
knew that. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
but now they have a password at USC and at probably most schools.
Mm.
Right, and I think the professors also, they have the option of locking the class after all of the students
Mm-hmm.
have gone to it.
Really?
Yes, they can
Oh,
lock
good
the,
idea.
so no one else
I
can
just
get
thought
on.
of it. I know years ago, I know somebody who took courses from Harvard, what was it, night courses or something or other, and for this in the son's name, so the son could get a degree. Because there are some people that are smart, or street smart, but they can't take exams. And then you got other people who can take the exams but don't know how to practice it. That's why they with law, when you get out, you practice law. You never hear of law students practicing law because they don't teach you how to practice. They teach you the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And then
What do you
when you
mean?
get
Now,
out,
what do you mean that they don't teach you how to practice?
well, they teach you what the law is, but
Oh,
actually putting it in like pleadings and this and that. I mean, they have um, a mile course, but how to deal. I mean, there's a way, like say somebody, they have like motions to continue. Say some simple thing. You want to continue a motion. You want to continue your time limit. And
Although, Roberta, I don't if I can just interject. They do offer classes that do give you that side of it.
oh, they do that now? Because
Right. Yeah.
I was going to point out, if a new attorney might say, well, no, I'm not giving them the continuance, but in practice, you give somebody a courtesy continuance because someday you might be on the other side of the coin and you want a continuance, no matter what it was, and somebody's going to say to you, oh, I remember him. So, I mean, that's the difference. When you practice, it's more than practice law, it's practicing, you know, common sense.
Yeah, that's very
Not so
true.
much common sense, but uh, I don't know what the right words are.
so the things that we see on TV, if we're watching a program that has law, courtroom, or is that realistic? Is that what really happens?
You're talking about the shows that we see like Law and Order?
Oh,
Far from it. Very far from it.
Oh, really?
Well, I guess one of the big difference I noticed when I started law school was how divorced from reality those shows can be.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh,
You tend
yeah.
to think of, I mean, before going into law school, you tend to think of, being in the courtroom and those things that you see on TV as, everyone is caught by surprise. Well, really, I mean, the law it's designed for everyone to be on the same, not necessarily on the same page, but you don't go blind. You don't walk blind into the courtroom. You know what the other side is going to argue. You know what they're going to be presenting. Much of those arguments have already been submitted to the court in writing. So it's very different.
Sometimes even outside the courtroom is more interesting than in the courtroom on some of
Oh
these
yeah,
programs.
most definitely. I mean, most cases don't make it to trial in the first place.
Have they done any moot court or anything like that over the summer? Like
We
Zoom?
had moot court tryouts. But that's I don't know what because that was what for 1Ls, but for the 2Ls or 3Ls who are actually in it, I'm not totally sure for USC.
Do they ever have 2.5 Ls? I never heard it before, 1L, 2L, 3Ls. Boy, I'm really outdated, huh? And so what about the people? Do they have, do both courses, like you have, we don't have that much time left, but what I'm interested in is, do you take the exact same courses does every law school give the exact same first year courses, second year courses?
I believe so. There are the main courses: contracts, con law,
Property,
property.
Property law. Do they
Civ
use the
Pro.
same books?
Exactly, Civ Pro.
They
Yeah.
use the same books, maybe charge one paragraph. Do they use the same books, do you think?
I don't think probably not the exact same because just some of the names I remember were looking people up.
Samuelson. Do they have still Samuelson? Economics, was it? Or something?
I think he was an
Oh, yeah.
economist.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
Samuelson Economics. Is he
um,
still the same book?
uh, I don't know. I think I've heard of him still being used in I was an economics
Right?
major as well, undergrad, but probably not in law school.
Isn't that funny? That's
Yeah.
so funny. The same books, the same thing. Do they have, before we leave? Do they give you courses on preparing to take the bar? You know how you should write and all that. The way to write the answers. You know, a way of writing. Do they give
There are bar prep courses that
you a
you
back?
can certainly take toward your last year. I think even
Yeah.
who else can
But
take advantage
we
of it.
just got word we have to wrap up. I could
All
go
right.
on forever. I got so many questions that I
I
want to
know.
cover.
I
But
know.
we'll get Steph another time. Thank you both for
Yeah, it's been very
thank
interesting
you.
to
Such a
hear
pleasure.
it from your perspective. We're walking in your shoes when you tell us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
you're
We'll have to have you
welcome.
come back. Maybe
Don't
for
ever
school
give up
start.
the music. That's
I
No.
won't.
fantastic. That's fantastic. And
All right.
Marc-Daniel, don't you ever give up that smile of yours. Okay,
Right.
Camille, it's
All right.
all yours.
All right. Thank you for watching to our viewers. And please let us hear from you if you have any questions about this topic or if you have any other ideas about other topics related to the coronavirus, because we'd love to hear from you. Remember, this is your show, the law, your money, and
And
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you both.